All right, so in all of our previous merges, whether it was inner or outer or left, we've been using that on parameter, and we've been getting pretty lucky. And the reason is because the columns in which we've had matching values that we've wanted to merge on have always had the exact same name, and that includes the casing. Now, what happens when we don't have the same column names? Well, in that case, we're going to have to get a little bit more clever here and introduce two new parameters, which are left on and right on. So let's take a look here. I'm going to import our two data frames, or rather our four CSVs, but there's going to be two data frames that I want to focus on. Just to break up the monotony a little bit, this lesson I'm going to focus on week 2 instead of week 1. So let's take a look at our first three rows here. And in the last lesson, we merged based on common values in the food ID column. Let's now say we want to bring in information on each customer, and we have that stored in our customers data frame. So I'm going to preview the first three rows here as well with the head method. So here you can see we have the customer's first name, last name, gender, company, and occupation. That's all great, and we can merge it in. But we run into a problem here, which is in week 2, that customer ID is represented in a column called customer ID. Meanwhile, in our customers data frame, we just have ID. Now, these two represent the exact same thing. They're both the same IDs for the same category of customer. Sometimes when it comes to data, you actually have to figure out whether it's the same thing. So let's assume for sake of reference that it is, and all we have here is two differently titled columns. Well, when Pandas is going to look at this, it's not going to know how we want to join the values from the customer's data frame left into my week 2 data frame. So the on parameter is no longer going to work. If we give it customer ID, it's going to say, well, I can find customer ID in week 2, but I don't find customer ID in customers. How the heck am I going to merge it? And similarly, if we just give it ID, Pandas is going to say, well, I can find ID in customers, but I'm not finding any kind of ID in week 2. How the heck am I going to merge it back? So we have to clarify which columns from each one we want to merge on. So the process is going to be fairly similar. Let's call our merge method on week 2. The first argument is always the data frame that we want to merge into, or rather the data frame that we're merging into, our data frame that we're calling the merge method on. So we're merging customers into week 2. And it's still going to be a left join or a left merge, so we can do how equals left, which means week 2 is going to be our focus. We're going to be starting with this base and combining the values in based on commonalities in values in our customer ID column. And as we can see, so far we've been using this on, but this time that parameter can no longer function. But right next to it, we see we have left on and right on. And this allows us to specify the different column names as they exist in our data frames. Now, as a reminder, left will always represent the data frame that the merge method is being called on. So in this case, left indicates week 2 and right indicates customers. If we were to flip them around, if we were to do customers.merge week 2, then customers would be our left and week 2 would be our merge. Again, that's sort of, reiterating why we generally don't need to use the right method, because we can always just flip them around and call the same left merge. But anyway, we have week 2 here. We're merging customers into it. So we're going to use the left on parameter. And again, left on indicates my week 2 data frame, my left data frame. And in that data frame, I want to look for the values in the customer ID column. So that's what I'm going to enter. After a comma to separate my parameters, I'm going to enter right on. And right refers to my right-hand data frame, which is customers. And to this parameter, I'm going to give the value or the column name in my right data frame that I want to use to match values. So in my right data frame, which is customers, my column name is going to be ID, not customer ID. Now Pandas has a reference point. It's going to know to look at the values in the customer ID column in the week 2 data frame. And of course, this is going to be its base and its foundation. This is where it's going to start looking. So it's going to say 688. Are you present in customers? It's going to find 688, find the values for that row, and bring them right back in. Then repeat the process for the exact same for every single row within this week 2 data frame. So let's take a look at what happens. There we go. We have the exact same merge as we had in the last lesson, a simple left merge. all of the values have been properly pulled in. We can see that they're represented here. There is something different here though, however. When we did the on parameter, because pandas knew that they were the same, it basically kept one copy of the column. This time around, however, because these two columns have different names, they're both going to be dragged in. So you can see customer ID from week 2 is present, and then we've merged in the ID column from our customer's data frame. And that's kind of good at first glance because we can actually confirm that pandas is properly merged. We can see customers have the exact same value in customer ID and ID. For example, we have 688 and 688. We also have 813 and 813. So pandas has done the merge correctly, but now we basically have two columns that have the same values. So they're really not needed, or at least one of them is not needed because it's basically repeating the exact same point. So what we can do here is call the drop method right at the end. And as a reminder, this can take a label or a list of labels that we want to remove, and I'm going to remove the ID column. And since it doesn't occur on my row level but on my column level, I actually have to put that additional parameter of axis equals columns here. And now when I execute this, we'll see that that ID column has been dropped or deleted from my data frame. And now this looks closer to what I was wanting. I have my customer ID and food ID. These are coming directly from my week 2 data frame up here. It's located a match for my customer ID in the customer's data frame and dragged those values over here to the left. Again, if we wanted to sort it based on the commonly the value with the common values, we can provide a sort equals true parameter. In this case, since we're doing it on see what happens here actually. It looks like it's going to do it based on customer ID. So it's going to focus on the left-hand column, which is week 2. You can see that now the customer ID has been sorted in ascending order, and now it's reorganized the original data set to order and sort it by customer ID. So that parameter is still available. But in this lesson we explored quite a lot. We talked about another example of a left merge, but this time whenever we have two different column names, the on parameter becomes useless. We have to use left on and right on. To each one we have to give a string that represents the column in each of those data frames that we want to use. So left on represents the left data frame, which is the data frame that the merge method is being called on. In this example it was week 2. And then the right data frame represents the first argument to the merge method, which is the right data frame that we're going to be merging into. So in this case, or rather the right data frame that we're going to be merging into our left data frame, which is week 2. So in this example, customers is our right data frame, and the right on parameter allows us to specify the column name in customers that we want to use to match those values by. Then we also have our sort parameter to sort the values in those columns. And finally, we have the drop method that we reused in order to remove that extra column, because whenever we use the left on and right on, it's going to keep both of those columns rather than just keep one copy as we see when we use just the regular on parameter. So you can see this combination of method chaining is pretty common whenever we're doing things like merges. And of course, this again does not overwrite the values in either week 2 or customers. So if we want to make this permanent, we do have to reassign to week 2. I can take a look at it. And now week 2 offers us a combination of both of those data frames. So that's the left on and right on parameters. And in the next lesson, we'll dive into how we can merge by values in the index instead of values in the columns.